I'm Jocelyn, and I'm here with the Poor People's Campaign at the State House in Trenton, New Jersey. This is one of 30 coordinated actions over 30 different states today, taking action to call for moral revival in our country. We know we are headed in the wrong direction, and today we are hearing from people who are most impacted by poverty, children, women, and the disabled, and we are taking action to call for moral revival here in Trenton. Stay tuned.
Political rights for African Americans didn't change their economic situation. In response, he turned his attention to building the Poor People's Campaign across color lines and other artificial divides the last 3 years of his life. In 1968, he talked about the 40 million people who were in poverty in this nation. Unfortunately, because he was assassinated, the Poor People's Campaign did not continue. We have had ever-growing inequality in this country, with 140 million people now struggling to get by on a regular basis, with incomes too low to survive on, and barriers to opportunity placed in their way. And so now, anybody who's impacted by these issues, please come up and join us here on the steps. We just need to keep the entrance here to the State House Annex open, but if you've been impacted by racism, poverty, the war economy, and ecological devastation in your own community, please come up and join us with all the other folks here.
That should be everybody.
That should be everybody.
That's everybody.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy.
It's everybody, right? Yeah.
Thank you all. And you're not alone. Today in New Jersey, there are 4 million, or over 45% of our residents, unable to make ends meet. This includes 59% of people of color, 53% of women, and 46% of children. Statewide, there are 8,500 people who are homeless, many of them falling in and out of poverty and homelessness on insufficient incomes to maintain a home in our high-cost state. These injustices do not exist because of scarcity. There is more vacant housing than there are homeless people.
That's right.
The state of California alone throws away more food every single day than it would take to feed every single man, woman, and child who goes hungry in our country every day. This is about our priorities as a nation. We must come to understand the structural inequality that we allow, and instead become a nation that recognizes the dignity and worth of every human being. In a moment, you will hear from two strong women who have survived with their children despite barriers that have been thrown in their way. In New Jersey, 73% of single mothers are either below the federal poverty level or working poor, going without basic needs. In the late 1980s, we used to cover 100% of children in poverty in our state. Today, we only cover about 10% with services in our state, 10% of our poor children. Even as an executive director of an organization, I do not make enough. I grew up poor on welfare, and my mom struggled to make ends meet with low wages, even on her own when both my brother and I were adults. If my mom and I did not have the higher incomes of the men in our lives, we would still be struggling to meet our basic needs in New Jersey. I would be struggling economically if I were a single mom. We can and must do better for our women and children as a state and as a nation. Yes?
That's right. That's right.
Therefore, we declare that if silence was betrayal in 1968, revival is necessary today. We come to remind our nation what truths we hold to be self-evident and what values we hold dear, We draw on the histories of resistance that echo their truth down through the centuries and through the power of the blood that has been shed through generations of struggle. We loudly proclaim that we will move forward together, not one step back. So I'll say it again. Forward together,
Not one step back.
forward together,
Not one step back.
forward together,
Not one step back.
forward together.
Not one step back.
Thank you. And next I want to bring up Monica Jackson from Princeton.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to all the leadership who have heard my story and feel that it is worth fighting for. I would like to read a small excerpt from Luke 18, the parable of the persistent widow. Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, in a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared what people thought. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with a plea. Grant me justice against my adversary. For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care what people think, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't eventually come and attack me. And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? I stand before you today as the widow, crying out and demanding that the judges, the leaders, the politicians, religious leaders, to give me justice. But unlike the widow in the parable, I understand the persistence and what prayer can do. I have an audacious type of faith that knows the power of the mighty God who wars with me. I pray to God that my words do not fall upon deaf ears, and that my fearlessness in the eyes of my opponents and my never give up attitude moves all of you in such a way that makes you say to yourself, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she will eventually come and attack me. I pray this day that God will see that I get justice, that my children get justice, that their children get justice, that we get justice. No longer will anybody hurt my people. My name is Monica Jackson. I am a 32-year-old single mother of 5, ranging from ages 10 to 18. I got pregnant with my first child when I was 14 years old, and by the time I was 22, I had 5 children and 3 baby daddies. I grew up the majority of my life in New Jersey. I lived in some of the poorest communities to the richest, from suburb to city: Howell, Lakewood, Belmar, Jersey City, Bayonne, and now Princeton, New Jersey. I was shuffled through the New Jersey school system and hated going to school. I was kicked out of the public school system, sent to alternative schools, and lived in alternative placements. I ended up leaving school at the age of 16. My history is filled with stories of domestic violence, sexual assaults, abuse, encounters with the court systems, and encounters with the Department of Children and Youth. My children have been taken from my home twice, and I have had a plethora of abuse and neglect allegations, and the Department of Children and Youth, now DCP&P, have been giving care and supervision custody over my children twice. I have been utilizing the welfare system since I was 16 years of age for everything from food stamps, help with bills, rent, transportation needs, to everyday needs of survival. On paper, I look, as we say, a hot mess. But thank God that isn't my whole story. But it's the story that we oftentimes hear when we go to places that are claiming to be institutions and structures that service the least of these. These young black ghetto thug-loved and fast behind, multiple baby daddy having, too many kids, trapped, clean, running, never stable, been in and out of the system all her life, lazy, in need of home training, absent parent, having no self-respect or future, probably on drugs, doesn't know how to properly parent, so a system needs to step in to help her do it. The definition of a true welfare recipient, always looking for a handout, lost cause mess. This story of hot mess is the story that is perpetually told within communities and aired on news stations across the world of impoverished minority black women. However, the inner workings of my story and what is oftentimes left out is that I grew up in what I would consider an upper class, middle class, close-knit, God-loving with a family, with a mother who was very faithful to me. She devoted her life to education in order to help me read and has been an educator in the New Jersey school system for over 25 years. I also grew up in a home where my spiritual life was cultivated, and this cultivation has become the foundation of creating a hope and generating a faith that always reminds me that I will have a successful future despite that which oppresses me. So if people want to know if helping children to understand their spirituality and teaching them to have a relationship with God is important, I am a living testament that it is. My story continues. I tested out of school at age 16 and enrolled myself in my first college program, where I felt that I would be a better fit in a more diverse community of people. Although I was young, I was engaged to my oldest son's father before he fell victim to the criminal justice system once again, and giving an exorbitant amount of time for a non-drug related crime while I was 4 months pregnant. I was together and married to my last 3 children's father for almost 12 years. I am a 3 times graduate with degrees in business, with specializations in law and marketing. I have passed FINRA exams, obtaining my Series 6 and 63 investment licenses alongside my licenses to financially educate and insure families, which opened the door for me to become a business owner across multiple states, working in impoverished communities to help them understand wealth accumulation and the bare need of life insurance. I will be graduating in a few days from Princeton with my Master of Divinity. I have held jobs that have paid me 6 figures, and I have created spaces to help communities bond and advocate for many. But people do not think that this is something to clap for. This is not a beautiful success story that many like to paint a picture of. This is a story of against all odds and by any means necessary. This is the story of the widow who continues to be left vulnerable in a society that rapes her, causes harm to her and her children, strips her of her dignity, and ostracizes and outcasts her by a society that she is called to love on.
Insist, persist,
resist. It victimizes and continues to label her, aiding in her insecurities. The stigma of the hot mess continues to follow her even today, leaving her on her knees, praying to God to give her justice in an unjust society. The justice that I call forth clings to the roots of the unjust, and at times inhumane experiences I have had with various institutions that have failed to meet the needs of anything that does not look like the roots of those who created it. It perpetuates a condition that cripples the people. For me, all these systems contributed to the overall hot mess, turbulent life that I have experienced. I recall an event from my childhood, actually what I believe would be my first encounter with the welfare system. My mother had been working for a bank and the bank had closed. She was a recent graduate with her master's degree in education, and her unemployment had run out. She had no medical insurance. She states that she was not concerned because she had a job on the line, but the job didn't start until September. It was May. She tried to find small jobs in the interim, but they denied her, saying she was overly qualified. She had gone to the welfare office to obtain any benefits that she could in order to tie her over for a few months. What she encountered was very rude, judgmental, labeling, non-sympathetic, irrational behavior from caseworkers. She was told to sell her 95 Honda Civic, move out of her apartment, and go stay with family and borrow money from somewhere else in order to make ends meet. She went back angered, ashamed, embarrassed, confused, and hurt. She sought help from our pastor, who reached out to someone she knew. She went back, and they reluctantly gave her help until she was able to get back on her feet. As I look on my own life, the system did not provide me with resources, but with a lot of finger pointing, shaming, blaming, and running in circles. It started for me with the education system that failed to adequately give supports to a student who felt displaced and who was very intelligent. It labeled me as a child who couldn't read and was in need of classification, an unruly child lost cause a delinquent. It did not provide a safe learning environment and continued to place me in a harmful academic spaces that would not foster proper learning until my mother stepped in, advocating on my behalf. She would not allow them to push me through the system. My encounters with the welfare system varied. In the cases where I received the resources that really helped me came from caseworkers who listened to me and tried to understand my needs. I found favor with them. But this wasn't the case in most cases. Oftentimes, caseworkers changed all the time, and I had to start all over in the process. What I encountered is what my mother encountered. I have even been told that my safeguard that I should have been entitled to due to a domestic violence order could not be upheld because I was attending what was an approved Work First New Jersey activity. After many fights and trying to understand the calculations of what families of my household size should receive, which is still not clear even today, I was given an amount of $600 a month for a care for a family of 6. This wouldn't even cover half of my rent. While in school, I applied for work-study jobs so that I could get money to support myself and get the basic needs met. I made $8.25 working hours, less than 10 hours a week. My benefits were cut down to less than $400 a month. I ended up receiving child support after a long process. Even to obtain that within the court system was difficult. Once I started to receive the support, the welfare agency would take the money and give me $100. When I realized that my child support amount was over the monthly TANF amount, I requested the TANF to be stopped. But the state took 50% of that. They said I was being put on child support through the state probation office to repay the money I had received because there was an active support order. My oldest child's father had been paying support and lost his licenses, ability to care for himself. He lived in a shelter and was jailed for the child support. I didn't even know he was paying for over 13 years. I had not seen one dime. And when I called the child support center, which is impossible to navigate these days, as I told them what my story, they told me I could get $383 from it. I recently found out that he was paying back over $24,000 to a state for benefits that they said I had received from my cases when I utilized services from when I was 16 years old. The courts then closed my child support case and left over $40,000 in arrears, and I never saw one dime. How do they expect me to support children when I can't receive the support that the fathers, who the system portrays as deadbeats, are giving? I have experienced so many issues around finding adequate child care. When I was able to utilize the resources from Work First New Jersey, I encountered much frustration in getting resources for these child care needs. They would tell me that I would need to have a job in order for it to be eligible for child care. That I couldn't start the job until I got the child care. And then once I got the job, I had to go through so much red tape, like being put on a waiting list. I would not be able to get the job or find the job that worked within the normal hours of child care agencies. This is what happens to people who do not have an economic advantages, who live and try to live and sustain themselves. They are threatened, and they are stripped, and they are left to feel like they don't have any power to protect their families. I fight to stay despite various forms of discrimination that happens, because I believe that my children deserve better, that they have a right to a good education, and that it should not be that they have to be subject to receiving a less than adequate form of lifestyle because we do not meet the standards of what the society seems as right. Instead of a caseworker coming to help stabilize a family by asking what it needs to be, what it needs in order to actually live, I oftentimes found discouragement. I was even told and threatened by a supervisor that if I did not leave my husband, that they would remove my children from my care. My husband was not a drug addict. He was a union carpenter caring for his family. They would take my children because they did not like his personality, because he refused to let them dictate in our home, and I questioned their reasoning and work ethics. My refusal to comply with unreasonable demands caused my children to be removed from my home. And although I had many family members to take them so that they would not be placed in the foster care system, the division refused to place them there. We went to court. The judge for the children ordered the children to be placed back in my care. She felt that the removal was unwarranted. However, the caseworker said she wanted to have my 7-year-old testify against her parents. She was later found to have been told that if she was to give this information to a judge, that she would be rewarded. These systems lack oversight and training on all ends, a lack of empathy and a deficit in understanding how to extend the open hand instead of a fist across all of these institutions. Most importantly, there is a need for diversity, inclusion, and sensitivity training. This training should encompass a lesson plan that teaches officials how to control personal emotions and feelings. Oftentimes, because of their lack of experience within these communities and prejudgments that are brought into the relationship that get in the way of these workers making lifelong impacting decisions that could either launch a person towards success or leave them left for dead. I stand before you today with a fearless faith, demanding justice, hoping that what those in power see is the God in me ready to go to war. I trust that no one has fear of me, because I won't be the one to place harm upon you, but fear of the God of my faith, so that your hearts and minds be changed towards giving justice. Justice within the systems of social services, child welfare, social security, and disability systems, prison systems, healthcare systems, housing systems, the education systems, employment systems, and even immigration systems that continue to tear families apart and leave human beings hanging from a tree, left for dead, lynched by the hands of those who say that they come in the name of freedom and justice for all.
Thank you, Monica, and so sorry for what you've gone through. Our next speaker is Aisha Young, and she's still recovering from Monica's speech.
That was good. Was that good? That was good. That got me on fire. I feel a consuming fire within me. My God. Woo. Oh, my goodness. I praise God for that. You know what? As I look out into the audience, I see generational curses that are going to be broken. You guys are the chosen people. The chosen people. As I was sitting back there and I was listening to my sister, a scripture came to my mind that how can we go into a strong man's house without binding up the strong man first? She talked about the systems, the healthcare systems. She talked about the welfare systems. We talked about, they sung about the water, how our water is being poisoned. My God, we are going against these systems, and we're going to tear them down. We're going to bind up the strong man in each and every system in this nation. And we're going to have victory. I believe that. My name is Aisha Young. Oh, my God. And I am so pleased to be before you people today. I have went through so much in my life, but that sister right there, she is powerful. You know, at first I was born into poverty. My mom, she was addicted on drugs, and she died that way. She died that way. She died with a needle in her arm. But before she died, she had me. About 3 days before she died, my father, he had AIDS, and he died from AIDS when I was 9 years old. They put me in a system. When I was in that system, I was molested. I was molested. And it tore me down. It made me feel like I was nothing, that I had no power. All I could see was what was before me. I couldn't see anything. It was a block up. I could not see any future, any hope in anything. So I grew up that way. I became addicted to alcohol. I became promiscuous. I started to develop so much insecurity within myself. And when I went to the welfare system, after having my first child, at 22 years old, you know, they really could not help me. They told me that people were stealing my money, Social Security, you know, that my adopted foster mom, that she was getting checks in my name and was signing them and had bank accounts all around. So I took the humble way. I started to go to school, but I still was struggling with so much insecurity, so much insecurity. But it's not until I had 4 other children. I had four children in all, and I had 3 different baby daddies. And you know, I really struggled a lot in my life. And when you go to the system and you ask them to help you, they give you all this, you know, you got to answer the questions, you got to do all these things right. And it is a broken system. It is a broken system that we're here to just elevate and help it to be more excellent to help our people. You know, as I was thinking about the unity, when I saw the people coming up and marching up and they were singing songs, and I really saw the unity in that. And that's how we can overcome. We can overcome by being unified. We can overcome by being unified. That's right. We have to come together as a people because all lives matter. All lives. Not only is our children suffering, but our children are going to suffer. My child, she asked me, she said, you know, Mom, how was you as a kid? Most of my child days, I can't even remember, but the aching and the pain. That's all I could remember. I couldn't remember happy times. I couldn't remember trips to the park where my mom was, you know, pushing me on the swing. I didn't remember nothing. The only thing I can remember was being abused. The only thing I can remember was being put in a shed 24 hours with no food because I didn't wash my hands. Those are the things that I remembered. We are here to help our children. We're here to help the children after them so that we can break these generational curses. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Aisha. The system is broken and we're going to fix it.
That's right.
And last, I want to welcome up the New Jersey Episcopal Diocese of New Jersey Bishop William H. Stokes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm honored to be here and asked to speak and want to thank the organizers of the New Jersey Poor People's Campaign, Charles Boyer, Diana Mejia, Quincy Bloxam, and Renee Kubadias. Can we give them a hand?
Yes.
Thank them for this. Yes. We are indeed in desperate need of a moral revival in our nation and in this state. Our theme today gets to the heart of why we need a moral revival. Somebody's hurting our people. Somebody's hurting our people through child poverty. Somebody's hurting our people, our women, and our people with disabilities. Back in 1968, when he was conceptualizing the original Poor People's Campaign, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, quote, "The disposed of this nation, the poor, both white and Negro, live in a cruelly unjust society. They must organize a revolution against that injustice, not against the lives of the persons who are their fellow citizens, but against the structures through which the society is refusing to take means which have been called for and which are at hand to lift the load of poverty." These same unjust structures which Dr. King identified in 1968 continue to plague us today. They continue to bear down on the most vulnerable of our nation. The load has not been lifted. In fact, it has gotten heavier for too many. Somebody's hurting our people. Somebody's hurting our children. Somebody's hurting our women. Somebody is hurting the sick and people with disabilities, my brothers and sisters. If America can't be great to them, it can't be great to me. Will you say that with me? Say it with me. If America can't be great to them, it can't be great to me. I can't help thinking of an old cry today, a cry from the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, who lived in the 8th century when Israel was under the yoke of oppression. It was revealed to the prophet that God had delivered Israel up to its enemies as a consequence of its sinfulness, of its corruption and internal violence, as a consequence of its own internal injustice and its treatment of its most vulnerable citizens. Hear the lament of Isaiah, chapter 1. Ah, sinful nation, people laden with iniquity, offspring who do evil, children who deal corruptly, who have forsaken the Lord, who have despised the Holy One of Israel, who are utterly estranged. Why do you seek further beatings? Why do you continue to rebel? The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faint. From the sole of the foot even to the head, there is no soundness in it, but bruises and sores and bleeding wounds that have not been drained or bound up or softened with oil. Our nation is sick from its head to its feet. It is deeply polarized. Racism, the original sin and scar of our nation's history, continues to mar our common life. When Mr. Trump decided to run for president, he determined to drive a deeper wedge between the people of this nation and ramped up racism, used it to dog whistle people prone to hate. He was successful. It is shameful, it is sinful, it is sick. As the Anti-Poverty Network of New Jersey pointed out in their well-researched report, The Uncomfortable Truth, Racism, Injustice, and Poverty in New Jersey, A Call to Action, published this past September, the correlation between poverty and race is undeniable. Communities of color, especially Black and Hispanic communities, experience much higher rates of income shortfalls than the population categorized as white non-Hispanic. These trends hold true in New Jersey, they wrote, as they do across the country. They conclude, racism is a primary cause of high rates of poverty among communities of color. For the President of the United States to race bait, to dog whistle, and to fuel up and reinforce racist and racist behavior is not only offensive and wrong, it perpetuates poverty and the violence and immorality that results. This is not the behavior of a great president or a great nation. It is behavior that every Christian and every person of goodwill should condemn without equivocation. The baptismal promises of my Episcopal Church tradition demand that we seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving our neighbor as ourselves. It demands that we strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being. Listen to that word, strive. It doesn't mean just stay out of trouble. It means fight against injustice. This is in keeping with Jesus' summary of the law. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. My Episcopal Church tradition includes as one of its marks of mission transforming the unjust structures of society. Through his policies, immigration policies, budgeting priorities, and tax plan, the President of the United States, his administration, and those who support him are attacking the most vulnerable in our society: children, women, the sick and disabled. People of faith and people of goodwill are compelled to interfere on behalf of those who are treated unfairly and unjustly. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, the prophet Amos said. Micah echoed this. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with your God? Recently, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Ben Carson, laid out a proposal that would triple rent for the poorest households in this country. His proposal would also increase requirements to qualify for federal housing assistance and make it easier for housing authorities to impose work requirements. An analysis of HUD data by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities indicates that Mr. Carson's proposal would put nearly 1 million children at risk of homelessness. It is reported that 460,000 single mothers with children would be most affected. At face value, Mr. Carson's proposal is wrong. Coming as it does on the heels of a massive tax cut that has benefited the wealthiest citizens of our country, Mr. Carson's proposal is an offense against justice and calls for a sure and unambiguous response from all persons with a conscience. The current administration is now allowing states to implement work requirements for Medicaid recipients. For these nearly 5 million people with disabilities, a work requirement would mean less coverage, worse health, fewer chances to keep or find a job. It is reported that administration officials acknowledge some people with disabilities will be subject to work requirements and unable to meet them. The guidance permitting states to impose a work requirement says the administration recognizes that adults who are eligible for Medicaid on a basis other than disability will be subject to the work community engagement requirements, but may have an illness or disability as defined by other federal statutes that may interfere with their ability to meet the requirements. It's crazy. It's a catch-22. As with so many other actions of this administration, this determination is reckless. It has not been thought through. It is designed to inflict harm. This administration is hurting people with disabilities. If America can't be great to them, it can't be great to me. From 1979 to 2012, the income for the top 1% of New Jersey residents grew by 219%, while the income for the bottom 99% of New Jersey residents increased by 23%. 45% of people in New Jersey are poor or low income, a total of 4 million residents of our total population of 9 million. This is a moral issue. We need a moral revival. If America can't be great to them, it can't be great to me. In our Garden State, 53% of children, 1.1 million, live in poverty. Again, the Anti-Poverty Network research makes clear the immorality of this. Children are hungry. As a result, they cannot study well in school. They often end up in the school-to-prison pipeline or living in poverty themselves. This reality perpetuates broken souls, broken communities, and a broken nation. It is a vicious cycle. If America can't be great to them, it can't be great to me. 46% of women, 2.1 million, live in poverty in this state. Disproportionate number of them, women of color. According to the Institute for Women's Policy Research around the world, and in every U.S. state, women are more likely than men to live in poverty, with additional disparities by race, ethnicity, age, and education level. Negative developments such as slow wage gains, growing income inequality, and a weakened safety net have contributed to persistent and unacceptably high poverty rates, especially among Black, Hispanic, and Native American women and children. In his powerful and painful book, Evicted, which traces the impact of the vicious machinery of the eviction process, in our nation's cities. He specified Milwaukee, but it could have been Trenton, it could have been Camden, it could have been Plainfield. Sociologist Matthew Desmond, now teaching at Princeton University, observed, if incarceration had come to define the lives of men from impoverished black neighborhoods, eviction was shaping the lives of women. Poor black men were locked up, poor black women were locked out. Somebody's hurting our women. If America can't be great to them, it can't be great to me. 59% of people of color, 2.2 million, and 35% of white people, 1.8 million, live in poverty in our state. Our nation's conscience is always stirred after horrific, well-publicized shootings such as Parkland in February. Why is it that the sadness, grief, and outrage, which appropriately surges after these mass shootings in communities of privilege, have not been equally pronounced or deep for the exceptionally high number of black victims, especially young black males, for black children who die from gun violence each year in our nation's cities? The lives of all children matter. Black lives matter. People of faith, people of conscience are called to speak up and speak out. We are called to give voice to the voiceless. A policy war is being waged against children in poverty, women, the sick, and disabled. The unholy trinity of racism, poverty, and militarism, first identified by Dr. King, plague us each day. Today we stand together to say, we see what is going on. We see it and we are repelled by it. We see somebody hurting our children in poverty. We see somebody hurting our women. We see somebody hurting our sick and disabled brothers and sisters. We see war being waged against the poor. We resist it. If America can't be great to them, it can't be great to me. As part of the Poor People's Campaign, we will march together and stand together as we demand that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share of urgent social needs, including decent and affordable housing, quality education and health care, safe and affordable water, and job creation. That voting rights be protected and racist gerrymandering, hiring policies, and sentencing policies that exacerbate inequalities for black and brown people be ended. That the proliferation of guns be stopped and the police forces in our communities demilitarized, focusing instead on real community policing and relationship building. If America can't be great to our children in poverty, to our women, especially women of color, to the sick and disabled among us, then America isn't great to any of us. Let us yearn for a great nation. Let us work together for a great nation, a nation that lives up to its original core promises of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all people. Thank you, and God bless you.
As I call our musicians and singers back up here, I just wanted to say a couple of things. Just take a moment and look around at the people, the organizations, the diversity that is here right now, right? And as I just said, this is how we get it done. This is how Dr. King was getting it done before they assassinated him and took out that light, right? I'm not going to go through all the people and organizations here, but just take a look around at the diversity in this crowd. We need to come together to end these injustices and stop the division from our power brokers and our policymakers that keep us blaming each other rather than coming together and make change for all of us, right? And I also wanted to say, just in terms of what Bishop Stokes said, he was talking about some of the folks in power. But let's be clear, we've had lots of bad policies under both Democrats and Republicans and others in this country that have hurt our people, right? So forward together, not one step back. All right, one more song.
Everybody's got a right to live.
And this is the second theme song of the Poor People's Campaign. The first one, Somebody's Hurting My Brother, which we sang before, and now Everybody's Got a Right to Live. So join in with us.
Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live.
Right to love.
Everybody's got a right to love. Everybody's got a right to love. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to love. Everybody's got a right to love. Everybody's got a right to love. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to dream. Everybody's got a right to dream. Everybody's got a right to dream. And before this campaign fails, we'll go to jail. Everybody's got a right to dream. To love. Everybody's got a right to love. Everybody's got a right to love. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to vote. Everybody's got a right to vote. Everybody's got a right to vote. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to vote. Peace. Everybody's got a right to peace. Everybody's got a right to peace. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to peace. To live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody.
So if you're in the procession, please make your way down to the sidewalk. If you're in the procession, we'll do one more song while everybody's gathering.
We're going to do it from the sidewalk, right? Yeah. We're doing it from the sidewalk, right behind the demonstration.
Anyway, I'm not in the streets, but I'm gonna be walking.
All right.
I obviously will see you at any
Gotta be the green. I know. I'm back to your button after this left.
We're all leaving, you dummy.
This is Jocelyn here with the Poor People's Campaign in Trenton, New Jersey. We're gonna take a break from the live stream as we move into the next part of our action for moral revival today. So stay tuned and hope you'll join us again as we gather to march in the streets.